Hey YouTube, CSM10495 here, Chapter 7, Public Opinion. Let's get started. Alright, the first section we're going to talk about is the introduction. And, first things first, let's just quote our good friend Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln said at as part of the Gettysburg Address, he said, the government of the people, by the people, for the people. So it's our government. It's kind of inferred that things should be done our way. And yet, things that we want, like a balanced budget, certain term limits, don't happen. So, is it really our government? Well, I guess we're going to delve a little bit more into that. Um, so, why does it seem that government policy and public opinion don't match up? Well, first of all, let's just point out that the government is not to do what the people want. They work to do what is best and correct for the nation as a whole. Okay? So the people might want some crazy thing, and the government's job is to tell them that's crazy. That's not a good idea. We can't do that. So further into our idea of public opinion, large nations like us have many different publics, and this leads to many different opinions. Now, we always like to go in a little bit of a theme of the course to talk about what the framers were thinking. Well, the framers hoped that no single opinion would dominate, and this would lead to compromise. You'll have to excuse my typing errors. Um, and at the same time, with this idea of many publics and many opinions, we have to think that in the end, only the most reasonable, and I'm going to put this in quotes, because reasonable meaning what politicians, and I guess even the public to a certain extent, agree with, will get through, and even those that don't can command support from many different factions. So even crazy bills can get support from all different Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, moderates, independents. But, we're talking about this idea of public opinion. Let's go to our next section here. We're going to put that right over here. Alright. What is public opinion? Well, public opinion is considered to be the views most prevalent among the general public. So it's what most people agree with. Though it's important to note that most people, doesn't always mean an incredibly high percentage. It still can't be considered public opinion if 51% of people agree with it. So that's important to note. And let's talk about, how do we gauge public opinion? Well, first let's see. Um, let's talk about sampling techniques. This is how we get an idea what public opinion is. And of course, this is in layman's terms. And a couple examples. How about telephone polls? You get a call that says, "Hey, can you take a quick survey and we'll give you $5 or something?" So, telephone surveys. In person, you can be stopped. I've actually seen people get stopped at the mall to complete a quick survey. Or hey, even online, some people get paid for it. You get paid. Hey, we want your opinion. $10,000 if you're the one out of 30 billion who do this. Okay, so those are sampling techniques. Now, what about sampling error? I'm going to define this as the maximum percent off from actual results. So, sampling error is once you do a poll and you get a certain percentage that says this is this way. The sampling error is the maximum percent that the poll's numbers are off from the actual results. It's a statistical term. In further polling, over the years, it seems that polling has a very high accuracy rate in terms of if the poll says that the Democrat's going to win with a huge margin, not a huge margin, a huge percentage saying Democrats are going to win, Democrats are probably going to win, because guess what? Those people who are saying that are going to vote democratically later. So that's public opinion. Let's move down to our next topic of interest, or section. Political socialization. You know what? I guess it'd probably be good to underline these just so we don't get confused. Alright. I'm going to just stay on this side here for now because it's just a little easier. Political socialization. Well, let's talk about the family. I don't want that underlined. Now, children absorb party identification from family. Meaning, if your parents are Republican, there is a good chance you will be Republican. Though it's important to note, once older, people begin to develop their own views and partisanship, or party affiliation. But at the same time, since they're absorbing it from their family, there's a lot of continuity between generations. So this is the trend. But at the same time, the textbook points out that there is declining ability to pass identification. And this really leads to it's becoming more unclear which party families go for. And at the same time, in terms of the family, there are a lot of different opinions on issues. And especially as it relates to age. Um, and just an example of some issues, gay rights, women's rights, um, vouchers. Those are all pretty decent examples. So, especially as it relates to age, but I'm just going to also point out here that there are a few trends, and these trends do seem to come up on the AP, so you might want to, just think about them a little. They're pretty easy to remember. Um, Trends. Older are more likely to vote Republican. College educated are more likely to vote Democratic. The southern U.S. more likely to vote Republican. I'm going to say except Florida, which is a swing state. Northeast is more likely to vote um, Democratic. And a big one that's Democratic, where I live, so I have to say, Democratic. Now these are important to note. There's usually a multiple choice question or two on this. Which one of these are more likely to vote Democratic, or something like that. We'll get into a few more. These are just the general ones that I want to just mention now, but there are more in this video as we go on. Our we were talking about how families, children absorb party identification. So the children get the party, but they usually, until they grow up and get older, don't really understand the ideology. So it's important to note. I mean, they're just going what their parents say. My parents were Democrats, so I'm going to be a Democrat. That is what's happening. Believe it or not, for the most part. So next topic here in terms of political socialization, religion. There's some religious trends that I'm going to list out here. Catholic families are somewhat more liberal. Protestant families are more conservative. Jewish families are decidedly more liberal. Okay, so those are just some trends you might want to have in mind. And I'm just going to say verbally here, where are these differences coming from? You could say that they're coming from social status of the religious group, or maybe they're coming from religious tradition. There's debate to that, and I guess it's a little less important than these actual things, but they're good to note. Next subtopic here is the gender gap. And the whole idea is there's a difference, which we're calling a gap here, in political views of men and women. And I'm just going to give the general idea here. Men are more likely to be Republican. Women are more likely to be Democrats. Next subtopic, Females in voting. It's important to note that women haven't always had the right to vote. They obtained it in 1920 with the 19th Amendment. All right. And also, with females in voting, it's also kind of important to note that there has been, or had, excuse me, low female turnout rate until the 1980s. So it took them a long time to really get into the swing of voting. They wanted it so much, and yet a lot of them didn't take advantage of it for some time. So that's kind of interesting. At least I think so. I'll leave that up to you guys to decide later. Anyway, um, some so continuing with the idea of the gender gap that we talked about earlier, um, there is there's a difference in vote choice between genders besides party affiliation. Um, women aim women have wanted to, or they've been more likely to want to ban handguns. They also want increase, and these are just trends. They're not, 100% almost stereotypical, but spending on anti-poverty programs. And also, at the same time, they want to, the last one I'm going to give here is they want to limit defense spending. Alright, now we're up to our next full-scale change of pace, change of topic. We're going to do that over here. I'm going to underline it even. It is cleavages in public opinion. Boom. Okay. So let's talk in terms of race and ethnicity. And we'll first start talking about African Americans. They're overwhelmingly Democratic. And I guess you could really think about this with, if you really want, that's a good way to remember it. Barack Obama, the turnout was quite amazing for this election of our President of the United States. In addition, it's important to note that there are sharp differences between attitudes of whites and African Americans on public policies. And I'm going to give some examples. Blacks are more likely to support affirmative action. Blacks are more likely to think the criminal justice system is biased towards them. Blacks are also more likely to oppose the use of military force, and at the same time less likely to think we should all be willing to fight for our country. These are straight from the textbook. And less government-based, more religious-based, I guess. Blacks are less likely to think believing in God uh, is essential for a person to be moral. So these are some differences, some disagreements. So let me just put. Now, where do whites and blacks agree? Well, they both agree that we should get tough on crime. They agree on abortion, dependency of government aid, dependency on governmental aid, and they also agree on all having the power to succeed. All right, so that's African Americans. How about Latinos? Latinos. You'll have to ignore my spelling mistakes. Latinos are more likely to be Democrat, but not as liberal as African Americans, though slightly more liberal than whites or Asians. There we go. So, hey, we mentioned Asians there. Let's talk a minute about them. Asians. They seem to identify strongly, well, not strongly, let's say more strongly, with the Republican Party than whites. All right. Nice. Nice job. All right. We'll get into our next topic. Our next, big topic. Did I underline? I did. Sweet. Political ideology. Now let's first define ideology. Ideology is a pattern, this is straight from the textbook, set of political beliefs about who ought to rule, their principles, who ought to rule, and their principles and policies. Now, political ideology. Let's see. What are people thinking about? What are the current attitudes in terms of political affiliation? Well, moderates are the largest. This does come up. This is very important. Group among Americans. Oops. Conservatives are second. Liberals are smallest. Okay? This is the current attitude and trend in partisanship. And so some people are surprised to see that moderate is the most normal, not most normal, the largest group. But why does that? Why is that true? Well, it really turns out that that most Americans do not use the words liberal or conservative on on their own, and even many do not have a clear idea of what they mean. And they don't know if they are. So I'm just rephrasing it. They should really figure out what they mean, and they know that people don't know what a conservative is or a liberal is, so they don't call themselves that. They call themselves, oh, I must be something in the middle, when in reality, chances are they probably do fall under one of those canopies, but they're just not under it because they don't know what it means. They don't understand it. And so even if they do know what it means, some people like to hide their true ideology. Okay? So now let's talk about some people, a certain group of people called the political elite. The political elite are those people who have a disproportionate amount of some valued resource. So a good way that I like to think about it is there we go. Those who have a disproportionate amount of some valued resource. So a good way that I like to define the political elite are really the people who have more pull than they should in terms of politics. Like people who have talk shows where they get politicians on and they talk about politics. They're kind of like they're kind of members of the political elite because they have a big pull. If they ask this guy the wrong questions, he won't answer well and he won't get as many votes. If they ask him the right questions, he'll get more votes. Political elite. So I'm gonna say they have more than their own fair share of political pull. There we go. And so why are they? A lot of the time, these people are political elite, but that doesn't make sense. But why are they the political elite? Well, what makes them special besides possible fame? They have more information than the people. They know more about what they're talking about. Their peers are likely to identify with and therefore strengthen their own beliefs further. So, and the textbook says that that a high amount of consistency of elites can be found in Congress. And this is really through, party affiliation. I'm a Democrat, I'm always going to vote Democratic. So I don't want to say are, because sometimes things happen. They tend to be more consistently liberal. While at the same time, I guess two sides to every coin. Uh, Republican members tend to be consistently conservative. I like that. Oops. So how do elites influence public opinion? Well, they raise and make political issues They can make something an issue. Hey, Jon Stewart has a show. If he says that this is an issue, a politician's going to come on and talk to him about the issue. And he gets something started, people watch the show. I mean, that's just a comedic example, but it really does have an effect. You know what I mean? So they raise and make political issues. They state the norms by which to settle issues, therefore defining policy options. And in doing all of this, they really shape the mass views. So, so it's not like they have so much power, but really, one major thing to me limits them. So, what limits elites? Now, the textbook says that elites do not define problems. They don't make the problems happen. But at the same time, they can call them out. They can expose them more. That's really what they're doing. If he goes on Jon Stewart to talk about it, he's exposing it more. It's difficult for them to make a problem. I don't know. Kind of weird wording by the textbook, but I think my explanation's a little bit clearer. But the big thing is that many elites exist, and that leads to many different viewpoints and options. So, leads to many solutions, and guess what? Many conflicts. Because it's like you have a tug of war with two people. They're pulling in two directions. That's a fight between two. You have three different elites. Now you have a three-way tug of war. 4, 5, 6, 7. You have many different ways to solve something, and the only way to win is if multiple come together and pull in their direction. But when you have many different views, that makes it kind of tough to compromise. Anyway, CSM 10495, Chapter 7, Political Opinion. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.